Classrooms of public universities have remained deserted since Monday, July 1st, 2013, following the industrial action by the Academic Staff Union of Universities. Disturbed by the lingering situation, the Senate considered a motion on the crisis.
This is one strike too many, and that the entire education sector is grinding to a halt.
The Senate is further disturbed that after 4 months, the negotiations have not yielded any positive result.
The federal government also wrote a letter to ASU in January 2012, that is after the suspension of the strike, resetting commitment to make available 100 billion and 400 billion on an annual basis thereafter. This letter also referred to as Memorandum of Understanding remains a subject of dispute between the two parties.
We must accept there was an agreement. Whether this agreement has gaps, quite a number of agreements that he has read out are agreements that ordinarily shouldn't have been something that anybody should have signed, but it was signed. Now, it is a moral duty for all of us to know that once an agreement is reached and signatures are attended, then that agreement becomes binding.
A former lecturer who is now a federal lawmaker blamed the government and union for mismanaging the situation.
Where else in the world do you pay a professor for graduate student supervision? Is that not why he's a professor? We also must tell ourselves, where else in the world do you say that the federal government must also be involved in the payment of state schools? On the one hand, we want federalism. On the other hand, we want the federal government to be the golden goose that lays every egg.
The position is obvious now. We can now see the consequences of their action. And I think if they extend it beyond this, then they'll begin to lose public sympathy. I would personally beg them, if that is the word that they think, will help them to get back to work. There is no winner, there is no loser in this exercise.
The Senate mandated its Committee on Education to continue its involvement in the negotiations for the resolution of the crisis.
Well, Afolabi Mokede joins us. He's a learning and teaching consultant to talk about that matters raised in the reports, the ASU strike. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you.
Well, seeing so many perspectives coming through on this one, sometimes, yes, you don't know where to turn. But ASU digging their heels, insisting, listen, it's all or nothing. But now you hear the senators appealing to them. There should be no winner or loser in this case. Yes, it shouldn't have been signed, but it's signed. The government has conceded, they seem to suggest. But here we are. We're still on strike.
Well, this is it's quite an interesting challenge that we're faced with, and I think for me the first thing is you see a failure of leadership here, in the sense that when the government comes out to say, okay, the agreement was an agreement that was signed, there was no way it would have been implementable. I think that clearly shows incompetence, because there is you were not coerced into signing.
Have you seen the agreement?
I haven't seen the agreement, actually. I mean, we've read about it in the papers, but I think the most important thing is you need to, before you sign something, both parties must have agreed.
Okay, let's take one item,
yeah,
because I think it was mentioned in if I remember, if it's the last media chat.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's that one, but it was one of those where he said that, I think it was the last one, where he said ASU wanted government, I think, properties to be handed over to them. Even if they were going to implement that one, ASU will have to have an asset management company to take possession of something. I think that's part of the requirements. But if that does not exist, how do you hand over? Because he also says, how do you hand over government property? But if you signed it, well, it's a consideration. But what do you think of that one?
Now, my thing is, first and foremost, there's an agreement. So both parties must first agree that, yes, we had an agreement. Now, implementing the agreement, obviously, it's a different kettle. Now, what it means is that you take the agreement, you look at the aspects of it that you can implement right away, and then you look at the aspects where it has to take a process before it's implemented. Now, for me, I think that's where the issue again has been. It's been this lack of trust, because you signed the agreement in 2009, you revisited it again in 2011, and from ASU's point of view, they've written a series of letters even before this strike was called. They visited the House Education Committee, the Senate Education Committee.
And the House was upset with ASU because they say ASU walked out on them.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know about that.
Yeah, a lot of people do.
That particular detail. But the thing is, before a strike is called, you just don't wake up and call a strike. And clearly, even from what we've just watched with the Senate report, you saw that there have been a lot of exchanges of letters, exchanges of mails, and things like that. So I think the real critical issue here is the government has not taken education as the major fulcrum towards national development.
How do you mean?
Because you will never have allowed a situation like this to happen.
Isn't this just a singular event? Because have you looked at the allocation to the education sector in the last 2-3 years? Mm-hmm. Have you looked at other avenues of funding for the education sector in the last 2-3 years?
Yes.
So if you have, how do you come with that?
Now, you see, the last time I was here, I had also said that there are many aspects, to education, and particularly even at the university level. So there are many things, different people are trying
to do. One of the key things is funding.
Yes, funding is one. But you see, the funding as well, it's also not just about emoluments, payments to professors or salaries or whatever. It's also about the enabling environment in the universities. Now, the government could claim that, we fund you with PTDF or we fund you with ETF. There are these various forms of payment going into the universities. But again, if you pay, there's also supposed to be accountability
on the part
of both the government and the university administrators. There's NUC there, Nigerian Universities Commission, that's supposedly supposed to regulate.
Part of what they raised is, who is taking account of the funds that have gone to ASU, the Senate of those schools so far?
Yes.
Who are they giving account to? Because we've asked ASU here, and they say, well, that's the business of the Senate.
Now, understand, so that's what I was just about to say. There are two different things. The university administration is different from, the lecturers or the academia. So if the government doesn't pay ASU, do you understand? I mean, in funding a university, the government funds it through the university administration. Now, I expect that there should be accountability. There should be reports, that go back.
So I'm kind of lost on that. If you say the university administration is different from that of ASU, or is it the academia?
Yes.
Does it mean that, we cannot take one or hold one accountable for the other? I don't
that's
get
what
that
I'm
part.
saying. No, we're saying the same thing. But you see, if you don't hold ASU for accountability, because you funded the university administration. Do you understand what I'm saying?
But we also need to ask, how much searchlight has been beamed in there, because we also know that universities have internally generated revenue, don't they?
Yeah, which is what I'm saying. So for me, there's a lot of what is going on here, which is why I said what I said. I mean, a lot of what is going on here appears to me to be some sort of incompetence. Because...
On the part of who?
Well, I mean, on the part of the managers. Whether it's
both sides?
On both sides. Because if government says, but we'll fund you, give us a report of how you utilize, how we fund you.
I'm more concerned.
Sorry,
Makode, I'm more concerned with the effects of this unending strike. You are an education consultant, looking at the effect, because if we go ahead talking about these negotiations, which ASU will bring to the table, and again the government will come again, and now the National Assembly, all arms of government, except the judiciary, they've all been on the same page asking ASU to call off the strike. I think we'll just be here not knowing what exactly it is, the deal is. Now, perhaps maybe if we look at the effect now of this unending strike, the government or ASU as a body will be moved by it. How has this affected learning of students or education, so to speak, because now we understand NUT has joined ASU on solidarity strike. It means that, well, education seems to be on strike in the country.
NLC is about to join as well.
NLC. And then
I read that this morning. But you see, which is why it's the effect you're talking about. I also think, in any case, that's what also the ASU people are also talking about, because they're saying that the effect on education is definitely declining standards and decreasing quality of the output of our graduates, which we all know that that's the situation right now. So that's actually part of what they are saying, that's their biggest concern, which is about the enabling environment in the universities. The last time I was there, I told you about a student in Federal University who, in engineering, is still being taught using carburetors when we've moved away. All the cars on the street have moved away from that. So that's part of the effect. The point is, when you are in school, at the moment, what are you churning out? What do you have access to? IT students, computer engineering students, they come out, they're still talking about Fortran and C++ and things like that. Knowledge that are no longer applicable in the marketplace. So the question really is, when you're even in session, what really are you churning out? And if the ASU is now, if the lecturers are not taking a position that what we are fighting for is beyond emoluments, what we are fighting for is about enabling environment, is about a situation where our students can actually be taught, and our students will no longer be ridiculed once they get out of university.
Let me pick up on what
Yes.
the NUT and the NLC parts that are about to join in, because sometimes you wonder. Here we have the Senate, the National Senate, yes, trying to appeal to ASU.
Yes.
Please sheath your swords and get back. FG also appealing to them. Listen, we've raised this ceiling to 50 billion. Just hang on to this for a while. We're not saying we won't do all at the moment. And then you have NUT joining on solidarity strike, and NLC also planning to join. And there are procedures for them to embark on strike. The warning, and then you have the industrial court. But all of this on one hand. Those who ask, what business does NUT or NLC have going on solidarity strike when there isn't any industrial dispute on their part? Are they trying to stoke the fire and make their appeal